You are tuning in to Ready, Set, Reset, where our goal is to help listeners reset their outlook by talking more about mental health from different perspectives. We visit with a range of professionals across the field to get their input and insight on what's really going on. Our current series focuses on unraveling and understanding impacts of life transitions. We all go through it, but it's a matter of how we get through it. Just a reminder, this podcast is for educational and motivational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional training or personal therapy. All right. Hello, good people. Welcome to another episode of Ready, Set, Reset. I'm your host, Sierra O'Neill, licensed professional counselor. If you're listening today, I want to encourage you to finish what you started. Sometimes it just takes you to refocus, reframe negative thoughts, and maybe even ask for help. Small steps count just as much as big strides, and they both get you to the finish line. On today's episode, I have LPC supervisor and owner and founder of Clear Fork Academy, Austin Davis. Austin, say hello to our listeners and tell them a little bit more about yourself and your journey.
Hey, listeners. My name's Austin Davis. Licensed professional counselor, supervisor. Started Clear Fork Academy back in 2016 after sort of a entrepreneurial moment where I'm sitting in a group with 30, 40-year-old men and they start talking about their 12, 13, 14, 15-year-old selves. And so it's like, why can't we avert this, 15, 20 years before. And so that was just kind of the origin story of Clear Fork. I mean, it's very high level, but that's kind of the start of it.
Okay. And so when you stepped out, and decided to start Clear Fork, was there a lot of static in your ear, you feel like, or a lot of any hesitancy to go forth with it?
Oh man, the naysayers were loud. And so, I worked in adult treatment for 7 or 8 years.
Okay.
And every time I'd say, hey, let's go do adolescent treatment, people were like, you're crazy, right? You're absolutely nuts. Like, those kids will hate you. And there just wasn't any providers to do that.
Okay.
And so that just made it even more and more as I began to tease that out and kind of ask God, like, what am I doing next in my life when I grow up? Mm-hmm. It was just so evident. But yeah, the static and the noise, the pushback was real.
Okay. And currently there's 2 locations for Clear Fork Academy, or?
Yeah, we have 2 residential and 2 outpatient. So we have our flagship, our boys campus up in Eagle Mountain Lake. Okay. We have our girls campus down in Cleburne, Texas. Okay. And then Carrollton and right over here in Fort Worth is our 2 outpatient locations. Okay.
And remind me, what ages is Clear Fork for?
13 to 17.
Gotcha. Okay. Like you said, that adolescent prime years of if we can catch it now and address things, then the adult life can look a lot different. I love that. I kind of come from that same standpoint of I love working with youth and adolescents and their parents as well, because they are part of the package. Sure. But, I just looked at it at that sense of, again, we can do a lot more for them now so they don't become those adults or just kind of prevent some of these things that may carry on to adulthood. So, I just love that. And I know a lot more youth need that hope and attention that we can provide for them in the treatment settings. And, just regarding, your program and your facilities, I did notice your motto of lead adolescents to a new legacy. Tell me how you came up with that.
Well, that's kind of the essence of our name, right? Clear Fork. If you think you're standing at the crossroads. Okay. Our kids every day wake up with a choice. They can continue on that highway to hell. Yeah. Or they could take a different choice or a different direction. Maybe it's just 1 degree of change, right? But that 1 degree of change over the next 5 years of their life is significantly different. Right. And I think my purpose calling is to create new legacy for people. So anybody I engage in, can I shift them 1 degree? And that 1 degree over time, if it's positive, hopefully, really creates a new way of living. I love when a parent calls me or a kid calls me and says, hey, I just graduated. Hey, I just finished ROTC. Hey, I just got married. Like these like big milestones in life. Right. And attribute those things back to their time with us at Clear Fork. So
wow.
Those are huge. That's legacy. That's what's the wake behind them, that people get to see.
Right, absolutely. Okay. All right. So today with Austin, we are talking about that journey that it takes to go from a life of addiction to a life of sobriety, and more specifically in teens. It's not uncommon for people in general to turn to drugs or alcohol to cope with life stressors or trauma. And though that's an unhealthy coping skill, it's a way that people find an outlet. And in the moment, it may be helpful, and it may be something people feel like that it creates that place for them to have peace at mind to some extent, or just make them feel, numb or get rid of the problem. But in reality, it only leads to creating more problems. And there are many challenges that come with life-changing transitions, as such as this one, and it's never a linear process. So Austin, as we jump into this topic here, I'd like to start off with just understanding from your, perspective, what are the most common precursors to the onset of addiction?
Well, the DSM gives us, 8 or 10 or 12. They kind of put them in like social, physical, mental kind of buckets. Mm-hmm. Precursors really are for our adolescents. They change friend groups, right? So, you have the athlete or something who's, going to after school, right, doing athletics, who now switches over to, skateboarders are going to get a bad rap here, but the kids who are skating and hanging out behind the school in the dumpster, right? Like those are two drastic images. And so when you see a social immediate change, there's that, right?
Right.
So we look at academics, or families will call us and say, hey, Johnny was an A student and now he's failing everything. Mm-hmm. So that's an easy litmus test to what's happening with the kiddo.
Okay.
And then the behavioral emotional things, right? Like your happy-go-lucky kid is mm-hmm. now sitting in his room, not wanting to come out, not sleeping well. So you have kind of all those emotional, physical, biological factors that we look at and kind of see. And you kind of put all those together and you see mental health and substance use really take off.
Yeah. Okay. And so with that, I know you mentioned, a lot when it starts, of course, in the adolescent years and talking about, whether it be sports and skateboarding and things like that. Is it more common? Because I know earlier you said you were sitting in a group, with some guys and they were talking about their teenagers and you kind of took that approach from there. But is it more common for addiction to start during the adolescent years than it is to onset, later in the adult years?
I think it's the foundation that certainly begins,
okay,
right? And so those maladaptive patterns of behavior.
Okay.
So what I saw in adult treatment is one of two things: is you have your lifelong addictive personalities or substance users, right? They started at 12 and they just been to 15 or 20 different treatments in their life, right? Mm-hmm. Like that was that lifelong person. And then there's the other type of adult who dealt with addiction or those personality traits in terms of performance. And so they just climbed the ladder. And so I had, bankers, attorneys. I had a guy who owned golf courses across the U.S., right? Like mm-hmm. super wealthy, high-performing men. When they've reached the top rung of that ladder, there's nothing else to do. So just drink a bottle of whiskey a day, so didn't know how to deal with those behaviors. And so that's what we see in our kiddos too, is mm-hmm. like these, I always tell our families, like we have the most successful and bright and smart kids in our treatment every single day. Mm-hmm. They're just choosing this bad way of coping with life.
Right. And again, sometimes that's often, patterns that they pick up from family, internally.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's hard to just step outside of the norm sometimes, for some kids that whether, they come to your program or, just get in treatment in general or find themselves in addiction. It's like, well, my mom has always drunk, or my dad, and he goes to work and this is normal. Like I can still function like this until, their trail is a lot different, or they may want more in life. So do you get a lot of kids like that where it's so common from the family tree to where they want to finally do something different or feel like they can't change?
Yeah, well, certainly as a family therapist, like you can't treat the kid without seeing the whole family.
Exactly.
Right? So
Absolutely.
It's like that's kind of my philosophy in our treatment modality.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of one of two ways. There's a really pervasive addiction in the family, or there's a high performance standard. Kind of see it in two ways, right? Like almost like a white collar and a blue collar kind of situation. It's like a lot of our kids come in and parents are, again, doctors, attorneys, things like that. And the kid's like, well, I'm never going to measure up. Or
the pressure.
I don't have the coping skills necessary to deal with all the things that I'm in, right? I'm in AP classes. I'm going to camps. I'm, like they want me to be an astronaut and I don't want to do all that. I just want to smoke weed and do nothing in my life. Or the other end of the spectrum is substance use is a way of life. So I may drink 3 beers before I go to work, and that's a normal day, or eating Xanax and opiates at the end of the weekend or whatever, so it's, you got kind of two ends of those spectrums, but our kids at the end of the day, I think they're trying to figure out who am I and where's my place in the world.
Yeah, because in those adolescent years in general, whether there's substance use or not, like that identity situation is happening. We're trying to find out who we are. We were both there at some point and trying to, determine, what will my life look like going forward. And it starts in those adolescent years of setting, little habits and kind of making relationships and just kind of setting yourself up for success in somehow. So when it comes to recovery and kind of going through the process, what would you say are the 5 most important things that a person needs to help them in the early stages of recovery?
In real estate, they say location, right? And so I think it's community when we talk about recovery, both addiction and mental health, because I'm a big advocate of like, show me your 5 friends and I'll show you your future. So if it's recovery, or if it's business, or if it's a fitness goal, right? Show me your 5 fitness friends. If they're all running marathons, guess what you're probably going to do? That's why I don't hang out with people who run, because I don't like running.
Austin, it's funny you say that, because I have a friend that just reeled me into that this weekend. She's a half marathon runner, and I found myself in the Cowtown 5K. And I was fighting.
Right. I did that once, and I refused to do it. So I think community, right? And so again, going back to sports, going back to maybe church, family, academics, or any sort of mentorship or community and support, I think is essential. Just to encompass kind of all of those 5 things. If kids have that, the mental support will be there. So cognitive reframing, or however you want to put that, right? Like having goals and setting goals, that'll be within community. Creating an aftercare plan, or going to lower levels of care, or outpatient therapy, or that'll be within that community, because that's kind of in your plan. If you're an adolescent, somebody's going to take you to that, right? So it's an aunt, or a sibling, or a parent that's going to wrap around those support systems for you.
So with kiddos, that you're working with, when you do present, or they have those 5 and they're still resistant, but mom or dad is making them be there, right? Do you still see them succeed with that resistance and having those components around them still? Or, I imagine maybe it's just a lot harder.
Yeah, resistance, as an LPC supervisor, everybody says, well, that client just doesn't want to change. Well, who does? Right? Like, I hate going to the gym most days of the week, but I go. And so it's I take kind of like a martial arts approach with that. And like, that resistance is really the energy in the room that helps me do treatment, helps me do therapy. How do I utilize that energy they bring in sort of against them? Right? So I think every client's resistant until they're not. And, even when I go personally to therapy, I sit in that room and cross my arms and cross my legs and stare out the window and like, I'm not going to talk. But 3 minutes in, I'm crying my eyes out, or whatever it is. And so, resistance I think is a good thing. And when we address it as such, helps us align with that client. And say, okay, look, this is a bumpy journey. How do we do this together?
Okay.
And just kind of acknowledge it, that it's there.
Okay. So you're saying you take that resistance and you use it as an additional tool for them to move forward, which is interesting that you say that, because of course you may have other professionals or even parents where they're going to fight against that resistance, or, maybe, give up on them because of the continuous resistance, but it's hard to fight for yourself when you're so deep, in addiction.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. So we earlier, or even just now, just speaking about, parents and kind of the, the family and, whether it be patterns that continue when it comes to substance abuse. Do you see that genetics or maybe past trauma play a bigger role than the other when it comes to, a youth that develops substance abuse disorders?
My family loves it when I just say yes. It's chicken or the egg, right? I think we are all have some sort of predetermined DNA criteria that we're born with, right? And so we know, I guess scientifically, that they're those markers, right? Either in the brain or in the body, the DNA. So there are biological markers, but when we do genograms, and you see 3 generations on the dad's side of substance use, you kind of have to look at like, oh, wait, this is like a country song. This is where I come from. And, if dad smokes and drinks and grandpa smokes and drinks, what do you think I might be doing for fun? Okay. So, I think nowadays our kids are facing an insurmountable level of micro traumas, every day, that we just I didn't face as a kid of the 80s, that's social media kind of driven, right? And so it's kind of hard to have a locus of control, or kind of an internal metronome or focus of self when the world is on Instagram, and everybody's best life is right there in front of you. Yeah. And if you sneeze, somebody's going to capture that and put you into a meme. And now all your friends and people have your ugly face on, 10,000 different views. So, so there is, I think it's both and, right? We have that familial DNA thing, and then we have these major traumas or micro traumas every single day that lead to instability.
Yeah, true enough. So with saying that, and speaking of social media, because where we are now, it's just so present. It's hard to get rid of it, and it's a lot of our youth issues, and even our adults that come into our offices that we work with, because it is, like you said, the best moments, or what they call it, the highlight reel, is always in people's face. So people want to assume and try to portray these lives. So I'm wondering for you, since you said you started Cliff-Work in 2016, and now being in 2025, do you see the differences in maybe some of the youth that you work with, regarding like the progression of social media and things, and seeing that the substance abuse problems are worse because of social media now?
Yeah, I remember one of our early clients was being trafficked.
Oh, wow.
On a social media platform. Okay. And so a 13-year-old sneaking out the window to get substances from an adult male who would trade sexual favors for the substances. And, so it's that, that's like the worst case. Yeah. Right. And then there's the kids who were suicidal because, their boyfriend or girlfriend broke up with them and posted it on the internet, and now they feel shame. Yeah. And don't have the coping skills, to do that. And our education system's not having a social media hygiene class, or how to cope with these things. And so I think like our generation, we had our frontal lobe formed before we got the iPhone. Yep. So it was, we're at an advantage and they're at a disadvantage because they can't really manage it.
Yeah, no, definitely true. I'm currently reading a book right now. I don't know if you heard of it. It's called The Anxious Generation. And so he's really going into depth about current generation of how they were just raised with, the phones. And he talked about when the first iPhone came out and kind of compared to our times and kind of where things are now. But it's just so drastically different because of the exposure and the even the lack of outside play, of having that. And I know within your facility and treatment centers, like you incorporate a lot of, just nature and kind of hands-on things. And I'm almost sure, but correct me if I'm wrong, there's no cell phones or social medias allowed while they're in treatment.
Yeah, we try to be unplugged. When we do movie nights, they're curated.
Okay.
And, we kind of have like a worksheet of questions when we watch a video. So we try to be real purposeful with those sort of things.
Okay, awesome. Is it hard for them to give up their phones when they get there? Are there any tussles at the beginning?
Oh, absolutely. We take their drugs, we take their girlfriend, and we take their social media. So it's like they're fully unplugged. Mm-hmm. There's a small population of like gratitude. Mm-hmm. And they'll come back and be like, man, it's so nice not to have my phone. Not mm-hmm. so nice not to have to post or be on a streak or do whatever. Yeah. So there is some of that they do realize that they are, and they all know it. They mm-hmm. all know it, right? But it's addiction. It's dopamine.
It's hard to do it. Yeah.
It's that's a whole other podcast, right?
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, because we all need to unplug sometimes. But again, like you said, if you are fighting this addiction and trying to get to a better place, again, that constant exposure or the expectations, it just delays the process, I imagine, and just doesn't get you where you need to be compared to feeling that, hey, if I had my phone, then I would be better. Because I get often too with the kids that, oh, my coping skill is my phone. Yeah. And that's the go-to. And it's like, we definitely have to find some alternatives here. So, speaking of, we just talked kind of about the genetics of things and family history and what that looks like. Talk to me about the impact that it has on families.
Well, if a family member gets cancer, everybody rallies around. Yeah. Everybody knows it.
Yeah.
If a kid has mental health or substance use and they're inpatient, nobody talks about it. Mm-hmm. So there's almost like a compression, like a compression chamber, right? That balloon keeps filling up with air until it can no longer contain it. It pops.
Right.
So some families are good and with kind of releasing that pressure and coming to treatment and coming to services and things like that. And others aren't. And so it literally affects everyone. Mm-hmm. Especially younger siblings or, so it's definitely affects everybody, because we see grandparents show up and they tell their story. We see siblings show up and they tell their story mm-hmm. of how addiction and mental health has just changed the outlook of their family.
Yeah. Do you feel like the youth realize that a lot of the times, that how much, it is impacting the family, or do they just feel like, oh, it's only impacting me, so why does everybody else care?
Yeah. So I like narrative therapy for that reason.
Okay.
And what we try to do is create a linear timeline for them and realize they're not the only one. And you drop that pond or that pebble into the pond, all of those ripples across the whole thing. And mm-hmm. and so being able to ask for forgiveness and ask for restoration and helping our kids say, hey, I'm sorry, Mom, I wrecked the car. Hey, I'm sorry I lied to you. And hey, Dad, I'm sorry I stole the gun and pawned it. And all of those things. So that's a part of step 4, step 5, in the steps, so we try to move our kids toward that healing as much as possible.
Okay. And so with the families, as they're, trying to rally around and be there and support the kids as much as possible, or just, support anybody that is struggling with addiction, there's families that give up. There's parents that are like, I don't want to do this anymore. I've put them in rehab 2-3 times. I've done this, and I'm tired at this point. So how do you handle families that are choosing to give up?
Again, I'm a CBT guy, so I think cognitively reframing that mm-hmm. is now having healthy boundaries.
Okay.
Right? Is giving up just looks a little different, Mom, because you've been a helicopter parent for 20 years or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that you just swing to the other side of the pendulum. So you were hovering. Now you're absentee. Like what are healthy boundaries looking like? How do we reframe this and say, hey, look, you can come to the dinner table and eat with the family, but you can't come high. Or,
of course,
you can go and hang out outside of the home, but you can't go with those friends. So it's just having good boundaries and expectations, and then kind of right consequences that are appropriate in nature. And so just trying to get families to reel back in. I know they're exhausted. I know they're tired. I know they're maybe bankrupt, just in all the areas of life, mentally, physically, spiritually, and in dollars. So in just having healthy boundaries, helping them reframe that is just really important.
Yeah. Do you find families struggle to do that? And they feel like it's either all or nothing, like either I'm going to be all in or I'm not going to be in at all.
Yeah. Well, and it's usually if the mom and dad are married, you have one on one side of the fence and the one on the other.
Yeah.
Mom wants to hover, dad wants to kick him out.
Okay.
And then so trying to get them to come to a family plan, let's run the plays, like just run the defense against his offense and see how successful you can be. And families come back and are like, that actually works. You can say, we do this, I was like, okay, everybody, I get 30 families in the room at a time, and we do our family programming. I was like, we're going to practice this, everybody. We're going to put 2 letters together and we're going to say it out loud. It's going to be the most powerful thing ever. And it's like, first letter is N, the second letter is O, and we're going to say it all together. No, right?
Yeah.
So, and they're, after you practice that and they realize the power in those 2 letters, it changes how they operate.
Yeah. Because it's necessary, of course, as, good parents or trying parents, whatever your situation may be, like we want to give our kids the world and be there and take care of them. Absolutely. But I think from what I'm hearing from you, it's like sometimes too many yeses creates the problem. And never, like you said, setting those healthy boundaries or, having consequences in place to where, things do begin to spiral. And then when it gets down the road, it's like, oh, we need to bring them back, but it's not as easy as it was to give those yeses out. And so, like you said, helping them learn to say no a little bit more. And then too, I imagine being able to say no without a lot of guilt, because I imagine that kicks in for a lot of parents of then that means I'm giving up or I'm not, there for them.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't understand, when we say no to something, we automatically have fear about what the consequences are. Right?
Yeah.
But we don't really take into account what the consequences are to saying yes. And so I think if you kind of whiteboard those 2 columns and say, okay, what are the consequences here? That may be longer term than, telling your kid no to the candy in the grocery store. That's going to be for 4 minutes, where maybe saying yes to something else could be a lifetime.
Right. Absolutely. So with that, in going through those steps in those process of trying to, or working to, because I know your program is very successful in getting kids and families to this place of a healthy life and being able to get to sobriety to where, there's a bright future in the front of them. Like you said, with your motto, creating that new legacy. So describe to me, I guess, what struggles may come, or interfere with someone trying to maintain sobriety, and maybe some tips on how to best maintain that.
I go back to like community, right? Like the tips, it's just being around people who are like-minded. It seems really, really simple and rudimentary, but AA, you have a sponsor.
Yes. Yeah.
In the gym, you have a coach. In academics, you have like a mentor or a teacher. It just kind of seems rudimentary. Like you go to seminary or a faith institution, you have somebody who disciples you. So it's always in that mentor. I'm a karate kid, I grew up in the 80s, right? Like, so you have Mr. Miyagi and Daniel, right? Like, so it's always that relationship. And if our kids can find that relationship, that just makes them successful. Yeah. And I just try to encourage every family. We pair our families up and say, okay, this family graduated 90 days ago. Why don't you call them because you're day 2?
Okay.
Right. We have our kids who've been in the program for 45 days. Talk to the new kid who comes in at day 1.
Okay.
And so that relationship, those bonds, are just grow every day. And you and I, we had 3,000 hours. We had to have a supervisor who kind of beat us over the head with how dumb we were. Like, why would you do your notes that way? Or, why would you say that? Or so it's like every relationship that we have, in order to be successful, there's somebody that we kind of ride their coattails.
Yeah.
So going back to that idea, I think is just so imperative.
Right. Okay. And then even going back to what you said earlier about look at your inner circle, the 5 people around you, they're marathon runners or they're this. It's like if you go back to that group of friends that are still partaking in those bad habits, it's really easy to fall back into those habits, right?
Absolutely.
So it's like you have to surround yourself with people that reflect you. I've always, kind of looked at things that way of like, look at my inner circle or working with clients. It's like when you look at your circle, it's like if they're not a reflection of you, then you need to reevaluate something, right? To some extent, you may have some outliers here and there, but out of all 3, 4, or 5 people, it's like there's going to be a lot of, the values that closely align and just kind of your outlook on life of where things are.
Mm-hmm.
So, Austin, just kind of talking about things, I really appreciate your time coming in today to just reflect on some of these things that people aren't really aware of. And some of the things seem really simple. As simple as saying no, as simple as looking at your surroundings, as simple as not giving up on your kid and just reframing on how can we approach this a different way, but still love them from a distance and be there. And so I really appreciate the work that you do because I know too, just working in mental health and behavioral health, when it comes to working with substance abuse, it's a different ballgame. It's a lot tougher because you do have people that are more resistant and the problems are more deep rooted sometimes, and you have a lot to work through to get through those things. So all in all, with what we've talked about, and I really appreciate your expertise, I'm wondering for our listeners, do you have any book recommendations maybe for parents that are battling with the youth right now or a young adult?
That's great. I read, I don't know, a book a week, or I try to. It's either in my ears or in my hands. The first one that comes to mind that I've had on my list for this year is the Anatomy of Peace. Any of the Arbinger stuff.
Okay.
Richard Rohr, like breathing underwater for addiction type stuff.
Okay.
Cloud, Townsend, boundaries, any of that kind of stuff.
Yes, okay.
There's a whole swath of information for parenting, for teenagers. And then my book, My Kid, My Crisis.
Okay.
We just published that a couple months back, and it's on Amazon now. And so I just took sort of the last 10 years of treatment episodes or journeys or stories.
Okay.
And then highlighted how we did, what clinical intervention kind of overlays on that story. So it's about the family and it's about the treatment modality. So it's kind of a education / biography of sorts. So
nice. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, look at that. Arthur too. I didn't know that. And you said, give us the name of it again.
My Kid, My Crisis.
Okay. And you said you can find it on Amazon.
It's on Amazon. Yeah.
Okay. And I will definitely put that information, in the details in the comments for the listeners as well to go and look for that. Because again, like I said, given, Austin's experience, and kind of success with his facility and program, I imagine there are some helpful things in there to kind of guide you to a better place or give you insight. And if anybody has a youth or is looking for additional support and getting help for their child, look up Clear Fork. Like I said, as Austin mentioned, they have 2 locations, Cleburne and
Fort Worth.
In Fort Worth.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. So just, don't hesitate to reach out because there is help out there across the board. And sometimes we just have to be brave to step out, whether it be for our family member. And even if you're an aunt or an uncle and you see your niece or nephew struggling or someone in the family, step in, let's have a conversation about it. Because when these things go untalked about, that's when the problems get worse. And it just takes that one person sometimes. Pay a little attention. So
Absolutely.
Again, Austin, I really appreciate your insight today. But before I let you go, I do have to harass you just a little bit. So we have a game here on Ready, Set, Reset that we play, and every guest is required to play it. And so I hope you're ready. So as I mentioned, it's called a stress test. And as therapists, professionals in general, we have to be quick on our feet. Sometimes, especially, both of us, we work with youth. And so you never know what they're going to throw at us, and what they're going to say. And we have to be ready, and efficient at the same time. So I'm just going to test that knowledge a little bit with 10 questions. So how the game will roll is you'll have 60 seconds to answer 10 questions. The time will start after I read the first question. And if you can't come up with an answer, you can say skip, but we're going to come back to it as long as we have time. So I hope you're ready, and let's see where you're at here.
Let's do it.
All right, let's get the timer ready. All right, first question. Name something besides ice that melts when it gets hot.
Jell-O.
What's your favorite food?
Chips and salsa.
Okay. Name a word that rhymes with structure.
Skip.
Spell the word adolescent.
ADOLSENCT.
I
don't know.
Name the 5 senses.
Touch, smell, see, smell.
You said smell already?
Oh.
Come on, 2 more. You almost there? Are we skipping?
Sight, sound, taste, smell.
1 more. What do you do with your hand? You got it out.
Touch?
Oh.
Hear.
Yes.
Golly.
Can you swim?
Yes.
What's your favorite city?
Texas.
5 seconds. Name a 90s movie.
Ferris Bueller.
Oh, and that's time. Austin, yeah, you barely made it there. You barely.
Too early.
Hey, we can say that, or we can, say, well, you were a little stressed out there. So we missed 2 questions, and you did get 2 questions. Well, you skipped 2. So name something that melts. You said Jell-O. I didn't even think of that, but that is, that's a good one.
Will. Anything melts in Texas.
Hey, very true. True enough, especially coming up on these summers. Favorite food, you got that one. A word that rhymes with structure. So you've got rupture, sculpture, and maybe even usher.
Okay.
Spell the word adolescent. You were just a letter off there.
I don't spell. I just don't. That's what word is for.
Yeah. Hey, that's why I'm testing you. I know people are thinking about that, and you did eventually get all the 5 senses. Sometimes I have to touch around on my face and my body. And 90s movie, you said Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah.
Is that not late 80s? Was it 90s?
It may be. I don't know.
Maybe. So
It's like 90s. What's 90s? I guess something Will Ferrell or Billy Madison. Or...
Yeah. Some You did okay. Not terrible. On a scale from 1 to 10, how stressed were you as we started going there?
Oh, not stressed.
Okay.
Like a 3, but
okay. Some of the questions tripped you up a little bit.
I guess, yeah.
That was my goal here. That's the whole goal, because we just never know. I try to make it a little easy and throw some ones in there, but hey, it's
fun.
And I appreciate you entertaining there and just kind of going through with it. So don't worry. Maybe if we get you on another episode, I know you mentioned when we talked about social media, that's a whole nother podcast. So maybe you might get a second chance, but I will say you did fail the stress test. All right, Austin. Well, again, I appreciate your time, just sitting down and being my guest today. But just real quick before we close, maybe if you had one thing to leave with our listeners, anything you can put out there, what would that be?
I guess my thing is just don't wait, right? Like, if it's a depressive thought, don't wait to take it captive right then. You don't have to, as a parent or teenager, you don't have to wait till you wreck the car and end up in jail, with a felony or whatever, or overdose. Like, deal with things when they're small. It's just so much easier to deal with.
Yeah. Hey, I hear that. All right. Well, that's all for us today. Thanks for tuning in and taking time out of your day to listen in on mental health. And remember, sometimes all it takes is resetting your outlook. Be sure to like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Ready, Set, Reset 1. Follow us on Instagram at ready_set_reset1 for mental health tips, laughs, and motivation. And if you know a student or have a child in the Fort Worth area that could use some additional support, visit our website at sunflowercenter.org. resetsigma.com to see if Reset IOP is right for them. You will find the resources discussed in today's podcast in the description area.